I made an effort to write down a set of principles that cut across every single enterprise that I've been associated with, and the principles that I would see being applied to the leaders that I call middle managers, or the middle managers that I call leaders. So I'm going to put it on the screen and just flash it in front of you, and then make an opportunity to discuss them. What I bothered to do was to identify a set of principles that any person who sees themselves as a leader, and that doesn't mean that the person who drives the truck isn't a leader, because this is about your career, and in that space, you're the owner. So we've distilled the principles into three big themes. These are principles of leadership that I have seen work in my life that I advocate for you, for your life. I've given them labels. Big principle number one is ownership. I'll tell you what that means. Big principle number two is realism. Big principle number three is connectedness. So the first big theme, as I mentioned, is ownership. And ownership for me is about, you go to the next slide, and you can take a look at them, and I'm just going to whiz through them. They're available to you. I'll make them available if necessary. But ownership for me is about painting a picture. And every middle manager here present, I'm advocating that you identify a space in which to paint a picture, to project forward. Now, if you just project incrementally, something that you're going to do Monday morning, people will say that's trivial, okay? And if you project forward 20 years and you envision SpaceX, they say, well, that's fantasy. So it's about identifying a space and a set of goals that are somewhere in between those two bands, the band of fantasy and the band of incrementalism. For me, it's about 3 years. So it's very important, in my view, as a leader, to identify some very specific, measurable goals that project forward. And those goals paint a big picture with a high degree of resolution. If you haven't done this in your career or in your organization, this is the moment. But underpin that big picture with some very specific steps. And the specific steps can be relatively small. I won't bore you with how the P&L works, but if you have a business with $100 of revenues and it's making $10 of profits, if you can cut costs by 5%, you can increase your profits by 50%. So those small initiatives that you need to document for yourselves are important. I'm going to pick up the pace now. In the concept of ownership that I put forward for leaders, yourself included. Next slide. Setting that goal is critical, but bringing people along with you is absolutely essential. And so setting the goal is one thing, that North Star, articulating it, quantifying it, that's critical. But in our view, figuring out how you carry with you customers, how you carry with you suppliers, how you carry the board with you, how you carry the bank with you. And in my view, the way to do that is documented here, but I will emphasize a strong and principled approach, meaning ethical, will carry you long and far. Somebody mentioned the word sustainability. And the second thing I emphasize is a human approach. We want owners who are authentic. And we believe that you have to challenge yourselves not to be a machine, but to be and project a principled leadership. Next slide. The second one is realism. Next slide. For me, realism, once you set big goals, is about measuring performance day in and day out. Next slide. With KPIs that are quantifiable, and that's the principle that I've been able to use for success, and to measure the costs of what you do against that return target. The third principle, so you set big goals, you adopt a sense of realism about measuring performance in detail. And then, and this is the one thing I want to emphasize to you as leaders, the principle of connectedness. And for me, that principle, next slide, has two elements that I want to emphasize. Element number one is a duty to take ownership and responsibility for your own education as a leader. But it's important to measure yourself against a global standard and ask yourself, what do you need to do to be more qualified, to be more capable, and to own that process and advocate for it for yourself? And in that process, and I call it be worldly, you can see it there, also understand how to communicate. Next slide. How to disagree in the form that you operate without being disagreeable. How to clarify objectives and goals with the people with whom you work. So, what I want to say to you today is that I believe that there are a set of principles. You can come up with your own, but it's a set of principles, in my view, that objectively you can adopt today to position yourself as a leader. And it's important to do that regardless of your position. And somewhere among those principles, in my experience, is a concerted effort to paint a picture, to set a very precise, high resolution, lots of pixels goal. And that goal needs to be quantified, and it needs to be projected forward to that space that is beyond incremental, but not fantasy either. You've got to do this for yourselves. Identify that goal, and then make the effort to communicate that vision to the stakeholders around you, at least quarterly. To all of the stakeholders, you've got to share your goal, and it takes risk. Underpin it with a sense of realism, with measurable KPIs, and then learn the tools of communication. That's my advice to you. Thank you.